It's like we're buying all these brand new iPhones and I don't have bread and milk at home, right, to feed the family. We got to stop doing that. We need to do this. Eventually we can do that, right? And we'll have to find out or figure out different ways to go and get the iPhones because those are eventually necessary, right, in today's society. But we had to do a reset and think fundamentally and foundationally first. And that's what we decided, and that's what we're doing.
Well, hi, and welcome to the Hiring Excellence Podcast. I'm Johnny Campbell, your host, CEO, and co-founder of Social Talent. And today on the episode, we're going to be talking about TA tech transformation. This is something that many of you are going through. You're looking at your tech stack, you're looking at your organizational structure, you're under different pressures for budgets, for hiring volumes are changing, AI is coming in, coming out. And a lot of people are looking at the tech stack they have, the organizational structure, and saying, this isn't fit for purpose, we need to change it. Our guest today made that decision quite a while ago and recently went live with a brand new tech stack, or the beginnings of a new tech stack. And he's here to share the story of the why, what they learned on that journey, and going beyond tech as well, what else had to change in terms of processes or design and the challenges of getting that stuff up and running. So if you're about to embark on a TA tech transformation, well, sit tight, you're going to learn some stuff. If you've just gone through one, well, grab a coffee because our guest Seth is going to share with you the same pain you probably have gone through yourself. It will feel at home. Our guest today is Seth Wear. Seth is the VP of Talent Acquisition at Wabtec. Seth is based in Iowa City, and he's going to be basically giving us an overview of who he is, his background. I first met Seth in his previous employer, which he'll share with us a bit more detail about in a second. But Seth has been through many different systems, CRMs, ATS technology. I'm sure you've seen all the crap, Seth, that's out there and all the good stuff as well. But listen, I'll let you introduce yourself. You're very welcome to the show, Seth. Maybe tell our audience a little bit about you professionally, a little about you personally, Wabtec as well, if they haven't heard of you, and maybe some context as to your team and hiring volumes and whatever you think is helpful.
Okay. Well, thanks, Johnny. A privilege to be on your show. It was good connecting with you. It had been too many years since the last time we talked. So thank you. As you said, my name's Seth Wear. I lead the recruiting function for Wabtec. Wabtec is probably the coolest 150-year-old company that you've never heard of. We trace our roots back to some pioneers, really in the innovation space. So George Westinghouse, Thomas Edison, George Favalet. So Wabtec came about really 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, into what is the Wabtec today. It was made up of GE Transportation, Westinghouse Air Brake, and Favalet Transportation, which is a European-based organization. We move the world forward. So 20% of freight rail is moved with Wabtec products. 20% of transit or people movers is moved with Wabtec products. So we're the coolest startup, given our kind of 6 years combined as a single entity, but the coolest startup that's 150 years old that people don't know about. We have about 30,000 employees across 50 countries. There's, I think, over 500 customers now worldwide. We have over 7,000 patents. We primarily are in the transit, rail, freight business, but we do have some operations in mining, in some marine applications, lots of manufacturing that we do, a ton of engineering, a ton of innovative R&D, really moving the transportation market forward. My team is about 50 people. We handle all requisitions across the globe. My background is I really fell into recruiting about 20 years ago. Had no idea what recruiting was. Did not plan very well out of college. So my future self would go back and say, hey, make sure you have an internship. Make sure you have some sort of plan, but fell into recruiting and have made a career out of it. I started in the agency space, then went to more the vendor side, and have spent the last about 12 years in corporate enterprises. So was with an aerospace and defense company for about 10 years, and about 3 years ago came to Wabtec, and I'm loving everything that we're doing.
Seth, off topic, are you a sports fan? What are you into? You movie buff? What makes you tick outside work?
Yeah, so you mentioned where we're located. So I'm in Iowa in the Midwest of the United States. We do not have professional sports in our state. So everything revolves around universities. And so for me, the University of Iowa, Hawkeye is probably the number one fandom that me and my family have. I've got a wife and 3 kids. Their ages are 13, 11, and 8. Excuse me, 14. She just turned 14. She has her permit, so she's driving now. So I'm in a world of even more kind of chaos. But 14, 11, and 8, we're super busy with sports, travel. My wife and I have committed to trying to make memories, and so whatever we can do that can give them lifelong memories versus more material things. That's kind of what our drive is. So spend a lot of time on the golf course, spend a lot of times in gymnasiums, on baseball and football fields, but wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it, Seth. Man after my own heart. I fell into recruiting, started an agency in my early 20s as well. And tonight I'll be coaching rugby, under 12s, rugby
Mhm.
in the freezing cold and muck, because that's what you do midweek as you travel around. Um, whereas, Ireland, we may have lots of professional teams, but not many of them do very successfully. So we cling on to the ones that do,
Yeah.
and young kids as well, Seth. So good to share that. Listen, I want to dig into this, right? Because I've avoided a word so far that will provoke a reaction in many of our listeners, and that is probably the system you're moving off or moved off, Seth. Um, the the core of what we want to talk about today is why you moved off Workday Recruiting and what you moved to, what the reason was behind. So maybe you might explain, because you're what, 3 years and a bit in the job, and so you came into an organization that had Workday Recruiting. Walk us through what it was, why it appeared to you that it wasn't fit for purpose, why wasn't it going to do what you needed it to do, and the 3 year journey to get this done. And particularly in the kind of 2026 environment where nobody has a budget anymore, Seth, right? Nobody's getting lots of money for tech. How did you pull this off?
Yeah. So I'll start with when I came into the role about 3 years ago, to set the strategy to think about how we were going to really transform what recruiting was. I created really 4 pillars that we were going to focus on. It started with team. So make sure that we had the right team members, the right org structure. We continue to do that, but feel really good about where the team was. Next, we looked at the process. And so coming from a manufacturing background, coming from aerospace and defense, some of these large multinational conglomerations, of lean process improvements, of value stream mapping. And so we embarked quickly after I started on just a value stream mapping event to just say, where are our holdups in our current process? From there, we had some HR input. We had hiring manager input. We certainly had a recruiting input. We started to map out where were those kind of holdups, where were we delaying, and what we found is about half of our delays were related to the tool that was enabling our process, or in this
Right.
case, not enabling it like we wanted it to. So at that time, when we identified, I think it was about 46% of the issues were with either configuration choices that we had made and or the lack of configuration that could be handled. We started to set off to say, okay, let's go to market. Let's see if Workday Recruiting would be really the tool that can get us into this next really ecosystem 2.0. So that was, we talked about team, making sure we had the right people. The process we knew we could fix. It then took us about 2.5 years to where we could actually get to where the tech was doing the enabling. And so through that time, we were working on our process. We were trying to manage, procedural changes, expectation setting, roles and responsibilities. But when it's manual, right,
Mm.
and or it takes 5 steps to get what you feel should just be a one-step kind of a click approach, we weren't getting really the value that we wanted to do. And so one of the main drivers is just our time was too long to fill jobs. to the point where if we looked across the globe, we're probably at 80 to 90 days to fill and then about 100, 120 days to start. So we weren't doing the business a real favor, right, by getting butts in the seat, which they care about. So we went through with our supply chain team, went through a market really review, started talking, started going to we went to Unleash, we went to some of these events, right? And started coming to these places to say, what are our options, right? We're a 30,000 person company, right? We're not a small shop, but we're also not 200,000. So we kind of play in this middle. And we ended up going through an RFP, down selecting to two, went through some requirements, some referrals, some reference checks, and we ended up getting to our current vendor, which is SmartRecruiters.
So tell me, what did SmartRecruiters have um, that others didn't have? And again, there's other vendors that could possibly
Yeah.
have filled that criteria. Don't get me wrong. This isn't an anti-Workday or a pro SmartRecruiters plug. Just understanding, like, what were the gaps that you felt were critical when you identified, hey, we need to have X,
Yeah.
and Workday Recruiting didn't have it. What were X and why were they important?
Yeah.
What are the things you believe are critical for the future that a modern tech stack has to have? And was it all satisfied with Smart Recruiters, or did you still need to adapt and look at other solutions?
Yeah, I think we're still adapting, right? So we're early in this journey with smart recruiters. But for me, the last 7 years, I have been in global transformation. So it
Mm,
has been consolidating large mergers and acquisitions, bringing in one tech stack, sunsetting another one. And a lot of times I think we focus, rightfully so, on our customers, right? Our
mm,
candidates, our hiring managers. I think often recruiters get left behind.
mm,
And for me, that was number one. How do I get a tool that our recruiters who are in it all the time can actually be more efficient, right? Allow them to have higher engagement levels, right? They're the tip of the spear when it comes to doing all this activity. And a lot of times we think, well, the customers matter. They do, but the users of this mattered. So we took an approach, and one of the things I wanted to do was what's a simple out of the box, right? Configuration and or the ability to make small revisions, but not reverse engineer the thing. How do we add automation for recruiters? And so one of the things that we like that that most applicant tracking systems have, but previously we did not here at Wabtec, just the ability to screen candidates up front. And I still want to have a good candidate experience. And I have been told in the past when you bring in some automation, right? Some if this, then that when they're applying, that unfortunately, right, people feel that there's a robot in place. Well, it's not a robot, right? We're using requirements of the job to quickly disposition people. And I would rather have people apply and reject them and they know they're rejected versus coming into this black hole and thinking, whatever happened. So that was one of the very first things that we could not have our previous platform do. We just couldn't get the automation where we wanted to go from 100 candidates down to the 30 that were most qualified. The second thing, we spent an inordinate amount of time scheduling interviews.
mm,
You wouldn't think would be that hard, but you've got usually a hiring manager or maybe three right on a panel. You've got the candidate. You're trying to balance all of these. And in our lean process improvement, that mapping event that we did, we had anywhere from like 14 to 48 days where we were stuck in interview. You can't do anything. And so having self-scheduling, having the automation that says, yes, you're qualified. Recruiter does their review. And as soon as the recruiter moves to the next step, which is interview, right? How do we automate that where it should be like what we do when we go to any other appointment, right? Let me select, let me see what's open. Let's take out that kind of cycle of, oh, I'm not available. Let me make four more phone calls that you do constantly. The last thing I would say is one of the more important things is our tech stack at Wabtec really was a single page external career site that was home built and the ATS. We did not have a robust multi-language career site. We did not have what I thought was a robust, automated, efficient ATS. And we didn't think about previous a CRM. We bundled all three of those. And so now we have in my mind, like our foundational approach to making sure you can do good recruiting. You have a career site that meets the candidates where they're at. It talks to them in their language. You have an ATS that can get through, more of these automation and efficiency, less button clicking. And then you have a CRM, which we were throwing away. I know you and I talked previously. I think we were throwing away 300 to 400,000 candidates every year that would apply, and then they weren't good, right? Or we couldn't go and like keep them as followers, fans and followers, not just transactional candidates. So with that, that is how we said that's what we set out to do, is how do we make a more robust ecosystem that can work on all users and not take recruiters, right, for granted, include them. And so far, we've been live since December, middle of December, and the plumbing is working. We have candidates, we have hiring managers, we have recruiters, and knock on wood, nothing is broken. So pretty happy with where we're at right now.
So I love the background, the story, Seth, and what you described as being some of the negatives of the prior situation. Like, it's just endemic across recruiting. You know, I mostly work with teams who have pretty modern recruiting systems, but that's not representative of, I think, most recruiting teams. They have these challenges, not being able to, to look at the full view, whittle it down quickly to a shortlist. To your point, you have to look at every single resume manually, make a judgment, move to the next. And we're seeing in the last 2 years in particular, 2-3x applications coming in, potentially from AI applications, or tools that our candidates are using. So the volume's going up. And if you don't have a modern tool that can automate some of those, like RPA is arguably a bigger theme than AI in recruiting, then you're just underwater, right? And rather than us getting, typically we would have got more resources. We're busy. Here's more people. That's gone. No more budget, no more people. You didn't get a huge budget for this. So talk to me how you funded it.
Yeah. So want more people? Generally, no, you can't have more people. You want more money? Generally, no, you can't have more money. So backtrack to 3 years ago when I first started, we went through this, team, process, tech, and then brand. We went through those as our pillars. Team was good on process. We were working tech. We said we have to go do something to bring us more into what is a kind of a full, robust ecosystem. So I started trying to build, partners, advocates, people that were influential with money, and said, "Hey, would you be willing?" And a lot of them were, "Yes, we'd be willing to vouch for you, but no, you can't have my slice of the pie." So working with my leader, who's the head of HR, we started talking with finance, with the executive team, and everybody was supportive. But they said, "Hey, try harder, fund it
Mm,
yourself."
mm,
And that was super important, a super important turning point, because forever I had in my mind, like, I could go chase more and more and more and get frustrated with you don't get more, right? Which it's tough right now. Like businesses, revenues, our revenue is good, but we're trying to be more profitable. That's what our shareholders expect. So that was a huge turning point when they said fund it yourself. And I finally had the aha moment. Okay, I will. And I will get to where we fund what I think is like fundamental spend versus frills and kind of nice to have, not really required stuff. So we looked at my budget and said, where can we draw down? Where can we spend differently? And so that's what we started to do. We started to slice the pie slightly different. And because we committed to that, and we committed to, with automation, with efficiencies, that we can decrease the time, which we can decrease. We had additional contingent workers that were helping do some of these manual, that we could draw down the spend in those categories. And so that's what we did. We committed to a budget. We have a 5-year plan. Happy right now. My finance partners have been fantastic, but we're on the 5-year journey. We are committed to self-funding it and spending less money over those
mm.
5 years. And in return, we get a more robust career site, the ATS that has more automation, and the CRM, which should help us, again, build fans and followers and not transaction candidates. It's been hard, though. Like funding Like I wish I had more money because I could go fund, different vendors, different spend categories, and increase fashions. Um, what it's doing though is it's drawing down what we pay for like subscription licenses to source. And that's hard for recruiting. I was a recruiter, right? Like you take away my license to get into this database or that database or whatever, social media profile. I feel like it's a takeaway. I made that call though because that felt like a frill that we could have when we don't even have a career site, guys. We can't even capture the people that are coming now. And so that's the trade-off. And now we've just got to work and find ways to work differently when it comes to how do we get candidates, acquiring them, maturing them through the process, keeping them engaged, etc.
I love that. It's like saying we need a fancy EPOS or cash register system, the most modern when your door doesn't work and people can't get into your store. It's
And
like,
that's what I use with some of the leaders. I said it's like we're buying all these brand new iPhones and I don't have bread and milk at home, right, to feed the family. We got to stop doing that. We need to do this. Eventually we can do that, right? And we'll have to find out or figure out different ways to go and get the iPhones because those are eventually necessary, right, in today's society. But we had to do a reset and think fundamentally and foundationally first. And that's what we decided, and that's what we're doing.
so Seth, you've worked for a lot of engineering oriented manufacturing organizations in your career. So you've, had the benefit of this, lean, production methodology all around you. For those who don't, right? How did you approach, or can you walk us through that approach to how you identified what could be automated or should be automated? Where was the fat, so to speak?
Yeah.
Is there a simple way to explain that to somebody who's not familiar with that background, maybe comes from consulting or software, who's
Yeah.
never gone through that could help
Yeah.
listeners?
So thank goodness I've always been surrounded by good people in like our quality organization or our lean Six Sigma organization. If you don't have that, just get the main stakeholders. And I would start with recruiters first, because again, they're the heavy users. Get in a conference room or a virtual room and literally map out every single step that you take. And that's hard. And what you'll find is there are lots of, well, we do it this way. Sometimes we do it that way, other times, right? And it'll take you maybe a day to just walk through, like, what's the first thing a recruiter does when they get the application? Walk through it all. And that's where you start to identify variability. And what we're trying to do, and it's been ingrained in me for a long time now, is have the process be consistent no matter where you're at. And so for recruiting, we have managers, we have leaders that hire in multiple regions, right? They could hire in the US, they may be in Europe, they may be in Australia, and then they're hiring in Japan. I want, and what I strive for my team is to have a consistent experience no matter where they hire. Consistency drives predictability.
Right.
Consistency drives efficiency. And so map it out and start to, just from a process perspective, gather around the ones that have the most variability and say, okay, what do we believe in is what we should do, right? With the process that makes it more consistent. As an example, before we even started changing our tech stack, I mentioned those 14 to 46 or 48 days that we spent in interview. Well, what we found in that walking the wall and putting this process out is that we had some people that would do like 6 rounds of interviews. Are you joking? What are we doing, right? Or they'd have 2 rounds, then they'd have an on-site, then they'd come back for a panel, then they wanted their 3 levels of leadership. It's like, no. And so we put some process recommendations and guidelines, and internally, it's hard when you can't have a system that enforces it, right? And so we worked on it for a year and a half. We're still in that journey to say, if it's a band, whatever and below, you get 2 interviews. That's it. People don't like that though. It's like, well, I've already interviewed 6 times. Well, guess what? You're not, because what does that do? It wastes time. And you guys are telling me it takes too long to hire. Well, your 48 days of spinning through all these interviews is making the candidate mad, right? You're losing them the competition and you're just spinning the wheels. And guess what? We're probably going to have to restart again anyways. So there are things that you can do that say you have to be brave. I think you need backing of others within HR or other business leadership to say, we believe we should only have 2 interviews. And then you plant that flag. And as you do this, even if you don't have the quality or the lean process teams around, you'll quickly, as you map this out with sticky notes, right, and hand scratched notes, you'll quickly see, man, there's a holdup, right, or there's a holdup in that process. That's what you go tackle. And through that, that's where we were then able to say, okay, now let's look at our system and can our system support what we want to do? And some systems can, some systems can't, right? And that's a determination that each organization needs to make. And that's where we went and said, okay, we don't think the current system can. Let's go find a system that can help us do the enforcement. Sounds hard, but really just the configuration that if we say it's only going to be two, you only get two interviews, right? Like you got to make a decision, and it's hard, but I will tell you the one thing that we found, Johnny, that was reinvigorating was I think a lot of times our customers, our hiring managers are just like, just tell us what we should do. I don't know. I've
Mm.
always done six because I found that was good. Tell them it's two. Thanks. I'll do two. Right. And so I think there's some hesitancy to plant the flag and tell people, what they should be doing. But I also think there's a pull that we miss in recruiting. It's like, no, you're the expert. Tell them what they should do and they'll actually appreciate it. And then they will probably change behaviors.
Looking back, Seth, right? You mentioned this whole thing took 2.5 years before you were able to press go on SmartRecruiters at the end of 25. Do you think, though, that that length of time actually helped in terms of allowing you the time and space to get the processes to be changed, to get folks to get on board, to change the behaviors? Because it does sound like your implementation doesn't start with implementation, it almost ends with implementation.
Yeah.
The hard work was done before that. And the time, did you find the time actually helped, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think it helped. We'll still wait to see, right, as we get 6 months, 12 months, a couple years into this, how much change we've actually impacted. But reverse 10 or 15 years ago, I did agency, came out of vendor, first time in corporate that I was going through one of these transformations. And I was like, well, just tell me the tech. And I fought with, and they were so right and I was so wrong, but they're like, you got to start with the process first. I'm like, no, just tell me the tech will lead the process. And I'd say I was somewhat stubborn and immature, but now I realize you can start with the process, let the tech come later and enable it. So it has allowed us to put some of these recommendations out there. I've done some internal blog series a year ago that kind of foreshadowed this change, that we were going to do this. It also allowed me to start those four pillars, team, process, tech, and brand. It started to let us focus on what does our team of the future need to look like too, right? So you can work on team and process so that when you eventually get to the tech, now it's more turn on the lights, and you're never going to stop, but it should now be more supportive, or that enforcement agent that I mentioned earlier.
And we haven't talked about it yet, but how have you evolved your thinking about metrics, the typical TA metrics? Because obviously sometimes it's driven by the machine you're using and what metrics you can get out of it. But have you adapted your opinion on what metrics you want to look at, the metrics that are important from where you were 3 years ago to where you are today?
Yeah, I would say we were light on metrics um, because we were very immature in our data.
Hmm.
So where we're going, we're going to have the typical time bound. We'll try to get to cost bound. Cost is a little bit harder for us just because we're a distributed organization. Quality certainly will be there. I'm looking more though from the time. Can we shrink? We set out 3 years ago to say, can we shrink 25% off of our time to fill and time to start? 25% shouldn't be that hard, right? But it would be huge if where I mentioned we're at 80 to 90 days to 100 and 120, like 25% shrinks the cost of vacancy. It speeds up the manner in which we can book revenue, right? With our revenue producing roles, either that be engineering or manufacturing. So I want to look more at that as a time bound metric. Like, can we shrink it? One of the areas that I'm interested in, I don't know, and I want to bring this up, is just around the automation and eventual AI,
Hmm.
right? Because how do we measure the effectiveness of that? I think everybody talks about AI and how can that improve. We want to do it, right? You've got to balance jurisdictional data privacy laws. You got to balance other concerns that our HR compliance, our legal teams have. But, a lot of it is, well, we're going to be automated. Well, how do I measure that automation? And eventually, when I do have more AI turned on, how do I measure the quality of the AI, right? That we're not getting, some of the hallucinations, but also like, is it truly driving down what it says it should do, which is do things quicker, 24/7, right? Things that my team, in a perfect world, my team would be spending time speaking with candidates and selling them on the dream of Wabtec versus doing manual stuff that includes button clicking, harvesting resumes, etc. So I don't know if I have an answer yet on what that new world looks like, but I'm very intrigued. But like, how do you measure the effectiveness of that? I think time bound metrics will get us there, but there has to be a quality component to it as well.
Yeah, like fundamentally, the promise of these tools surely is better hiring, and better hiring should be measured by better quality talent, which, to your point, is business outcomes. You mentioned already faster
Yeah.
time to revenue, faster time to productivity, or faster time to innovation, whatever that
Yeah.
may look like. It's the hard thing to measure, though. Like, it's
Yep.
not as if we measure it today really well, so therefore we just apply the same metrics to AI. We
Yep.
can't measure it today. Nobody has cracked this, right? So it is interesting. You reminded me when you're thinking about recommendations on different recruitment CRMs, etc. I remember sitting with a customer a couple of years ago, and she was explaining to me that they were in the middle of moving from system A to system B. I said, "Well, system A crap." She said, "Listen," she goes, "System A was purchased by my predecessor, because the obsession of the organization was around metrics. And as a CRM, it was brilliant at capturing loads of recruitment metrics.
Yep.
Did you know what the challenge is around that?" She said, "To capture metrics, you need lots of friction, because you
Hmm.
only get measurements at friction points.
Yep.
And that drives a horrible candidate experience. It's brilliant for measurement, shit for candidate experience,
Yep.
pardon my language."
Yep.
And she said, "We now realize we're hiring engineers who value for candidate experience. So we implement a tool that's optimized for candidate experience."
Yep.
And I hadn't thought about this from the concept of, everyone says this is a good ATS, this is a bad CRM, blah, blah, blah. And her point was, we just needed to optimize for something else. The old one wasn't bad. It was great for what it was bought for. We just need to optimize for something else. And it kind of comes to your point around, think about your process and your people first. Get that nail, what you need, then go find a platform that works for your need.
Yeah.
There isn't, you're loving Smart Recruiters so far. It might not be for everybody.
Yep.
You didn't, Workday Recruiting didn't work for you, but maybe it worked for somebody else. I think there's a lot to be said for, understanding your business and building the process right, getting into it and looking at your people structures. It's the hard work you've done, Seth, right? And as you had, you had the humility to say it wasn't how you started out, but it's maybe what you learned through this. So tell me, two more questions if you don't mind, Seth. Right? First of all, what does success look like in a year's time? Right? You've gone live now. You get to the end of 26. What do you hope to have achieved? What are you going to measure to say, this worked?
Yeah. So the 25% reduction in time across all of our jobs is going to be, I think, a key impact that we can look at. The second thing is going to be around just our branding ability out of the CRM and the career site. So I'm going to track how many more, visits to the website do we have?
Right.
How much harvesting of those that have joined the CRM, the talent communities, right? How much harvesting and then engagement, not just to say we sent them this many, messages, but did they come back, right? Did they come back? Did they reapply? Um, we 3 years ago we started with the NPS framework survey, and so that's going to be, to me, that's one of my most critical components of just how do our customers view us. So can we take incremental steps to increase our NPS with our candidates and with our hiring managers? So those three things are probably what I'm going to look at the most. But who knows? Maybe something will change, and we'll say, okay, that's important now. One of the areas, and it's more around the cost of vacancy. But our cost of vacancy with our hourly positions, I hope to shrink because we can have people in those seats quicker. And so, I did some math. If it's just call it $20 an hour, if you have that over 40 hours a week times 4 weeks, it's like $3,500 roughly, right? Sherm says that to replace an employee, it's 6 months of that cost. Well, it's 6 months, and take that times however many replacements we had at any given point. I think we have, call it 150 jobs. It got to be like 20,000 per job like per month. And when you take that over 12 months, like our cost of vacancy was like $30 million. Right now, I'm not gonna get $30 million and say, "Hey, company, right?" I said, but like there are true costs. Like you get stuff done quicker, right? And if I take that 30 million, there's a cost of vacancy, and can get it down to like 25% less, I save the company, or in this case, maybe help the company get 4.8 million more in revenue. That much, right? And so those are the things that, like, in recruiting, self funding is hard. You can do it, but you also, like, there is actual business impact to what we do. You just got to find in your organization what, sometimes it's the quality, right? It's replacement costs, vacancy costs, lost revenue, right? Like all that stuff. But that's what I think the business leaders would look for us to say is not just how quick did it do, but like, did you actually shrink it? Because if you shrunk the time, you now have helped us save, or in this case, maybe produce X more.
I love that. What you're demonstrating there is talking business language and connecting recruiting language to business language. We'd Matt Howe from BT on the podcast a few months ago talking about how he funded an AI initiative to reduce attrition in the team because he'd calculated the cost of attrition. But well, interestingly, he didn't calculate. He knew there was a cost. He went to finance and said, "Finance, what is the cost of every person I have to rehire who leaves? Tell me the numbers." And they went conservative and they gave them the very direct cost. A laptop has to be purchased, training course. They work for 2.5 weeks before they're put on a call, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And he got this course of £4,000. He said, right, I know it's more than that, but finance have signed off on £4,000. And again, he self-funded his business case to get an AI tool in and saw much more benefit from that. But that is a common theme, Seth, that we're hearing, that to be a successful TA leader today, you have to be willing to self-fund. You got to talk business language. You got to get into real business outcomes of what you do in TA. Just saying we go faster or we've got nice NPS from candidates ain't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So are there any final kind of recommendations you'd make to leaders who are listening to this about funding or positioning or metrics
Yeah.
to get these kind of projects up and running, whether it's RPA, a new ATS, or CRM? What is your advice to the leaders
Yeah.
listening?
I'd say the last thing is you got to listen and be conscious of what the business environment is. And so I mentioned 3 years ago, right? We knew we needed to look at how can we get to the next step? What is our process? I then, after that, started to say, okay, we have some tech issues. Tried to go and build this coalition of partners that could help fund it. They didn't really have the business appetite because they weren't hiring a lot. And so I quickly pivoted to say that's not going to work because they care, but they don't care enough. And it's not a bad thing, but you need to listen, right, to these leaders, because if we were in high growth, high volume mode, heck yeah, they probably would have thrown money in. But we haven't been in that for 3 years. We've been pretty steady, which is fine. I knew I couldn't go and pitch them on, well, because of all these jobs. They'd be like, well, what do you mean all these jobs? We're not doing that much hiring. So what I pivoted to is, again, the self-funding, but also we got to, like, well, why are you doing it now? And I said, we're going to do it now because it's better when we are really busy, right? Like, do it now so you're proactive, because you guys will yell at me even more, right, if we're reactive and we can't hire shit off the streets because everything is broken. So listen, position it, and then find what works in your organization. We wanted a system that was not going to require a lot of hiring manager training. And so through our RFP process, through our reference checks, through our referrals, we found that with the current environment. And that was perfect for us because I didn't want to take time away from the hiring managers. Other organizations, they might have time. Find something that works for them. But you got to listen. You got to be brave. You got to speak in business terms, and you got to know when to fight the good fight. And for this, the funniest thing I got from one of my finance partners, well, if you self-fund it, no one can yell at you if it doesn't go well. I was like, you know what? Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll take
It's
that
true.
as like, go get them, son. And that's what we did.
I love it, Seth. It's been amazing to hear your story, the advice. You certainly exemplifying what a modern TA leader needs to do and how they act. You're speaking all the right language. So it's been great to hear the story. Thank you for sharing it, Seth. Thanks for joining us on this cold winter's day
Yes.
I think for both of us. But listen, here's to a brighter 2026. I'm looking forward to see how it goes. You might have some lessons to share as you kind of evolve this AI story. And we learn more as you said, so far, no calls, no problems. You've done what? How many hires so far? 150 roles hired?
We had 150 hires. We have over 500 jobs in the ATS. 400 of them are posted. So I'd be concerned if the plumbing wasn't full of water, but it's full and it's working. So far, so good.
All right, nice job, Seth. Thanks for
Well,
joining us.
thank you,
And
Johnny.
thanking you for joining us as well on the show this week. I hope you've got some good insights from Seth in terms of, for me, huge amount around transformation, getting your processes and your people right first, understanding that self-funding, talking the business language, just tick, tick, tick for modern TA management and leadership there. Tons of goodies in there for everyone. We'll be back again next week, though. We got another great podcast, another great guest. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, or follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube if that's your preference. We'll be back next week with another great guest. Until then, take care.